It's very easy to criticize all of Toy Biz's Marvel Legends women action figures as just bad across the board, but we're going to look at them today and decide which of them are the best of the best. This one isn't so much of a top 5 best list, this is more of a top 5 least bad list. Be sure you stick around for our honorable mention soulmates because I think it's gonna surprise you. If you support what I do, please click subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss a single video of mine when it comes out. The 5th best Lady Marvel Legend from Toy Biz is Black Widow. This one is on the Elektra body, and this is probably the best example of that body. When we look at Black Widow, we see some elements that come together reasonably well. There's separation between her costume and her skin, and that's absolutely huge. It really makes an action figure look so much better when you see that. The hips don't have the same hinge as Elektra, so considering the type of body that this is, it feels like she has more natural movement and she looks a little bit better when she's just in a standing pose. Also, a very positive thing about this one is that the gauntlets as well as her belt look very nice. The aesthetic for Toy Biz at the time when they were making Marvel Legends action figures was to do sort of a mishmash of the past and the present. Of course, because it is a Toy Biz action figure, we see some things that don't look all that great, like the hands are in this general just open state, and of course the hands are articulated here, but it's not very useful articulation. And then you have the neck, where it just looks weird on her. Her neck is wider than her head is almost. According to the standard Toy Biz articulation of the time, she was pretty fine. She has shoulders that flare out because Toy Biz used a sort of lat articulation that allowed the shoulders to move up. Another nice thing about this one is the folds they put in her costume. It's another one of those elements that really adds a lot to a sculpt. And Toy Biz, to their credit, was always experimenting with sculpts. The 4th best Toy Biz lady action figure is the Wasp. The Wasp is notable for having a much more human-looking body than previous lady action figures had. We see a lot of the hallmarks from early Hasbro Marvel Legends on the Wasp here. No hand articulation, no toe articulation. The wrist swivel has been eliminated, a lot of her details are just painted on, and the paint apps as we see them are kind of bland. We don't really see any washes like we're used to seeing on Marvel Legends on this one. Now despite that, we do see some nice textures on this Wasp action figure. There are lots of veins all over her wings that give it this kind of gross feel, even though they feel like very hard plastic. And also she's got folds on her hip piece, and she also has separation at her heels. There's nothing on this one that makes me say, wow, Toy Biz really messed up on this one. And I think that they did the simple paint apps for her costume because they had multiple different variants of the Wasp out at the time. And not only that, but the variant did have a completely different head sculpt. I'm just looking up close at this action figure now and seeing that there's some separation between the Wasp neck and her suit, so yeah, I really respect what Toy Biz accomplished with this action figure. The 3rd best women's action figure from Toy Biz is Kitty Pryde. This is a very detailed sculpt, and also the articulation on this one is very interesting because she comes with a thigh swivel, something that we didn't really see at this point from Marvel Legends action figures, and also was a harbinger of what was to come from Hasbro, I believe. The thing that really strikes me about Kitty Pryde is how much detail they put on her costume. There's little separations everywhere. There's separations at her neck, there's separations between different elements of the costume at her shoulders and her torso, and you can even see little textures on her costume that represent stitches. Now that's not to say that this action figure is perfect, because obviously you look at the body and it looks a little weird. It doesn't look perfectly proportioned. So you might say in this instance that putting all the detail on this one is a little bit like polishing a turd. That said, her legs look really good. I think they're very well done, and if they had just done some more work on the upper body, I think Kitty Pryde could have been really good. The 2nd best Lady Marvel Legend from Toy Biz is Storm, and this is one that I think actually still holds up pretty well today. Just looking at the sculpt on it, it looks pretty much perfect. We see this body that's very thin, very tall. That's how Storm should be represented. And we also see lots and lots of textures that really make this costume pop out. We see the separation between her boots, and she actually, just like Kitty Pryde, has thigh swivels. And the thigh swivel is hidden by the top of her boot. There's bagginess on her sleeves, the X symbols and her shoulder pads are separate pieces from the rest of the costume. It feels great, and her hair just looks like it's flowing in the wind. Even the hands look good, and Toybiz really wasn't known for doing great hands at the time. Even the cape on her is really well done. It's very rubbery and it's not very heavy, so she's able to carry it very well. And not only that, but it looks like it's flowing in the wind like all the rest of the elements on her sculpt. You can really tell that Toybiz was trying to make her look like she was standing in the middle of a storm, and mission accomplished because the sculpt really evokes that. Her articulation is very surprising. Despite the large hairpiece, you can move her head around very well. She's very mobile in that area, and actually the rest of her body is very mobile as well. Because it is Toybiz, she has the lat articulation, so she can reach up a little higher than we might be used to these days. Fortunately, the lat articulation really works for Storm's character, as opposed to a lot of the other Marvel Legends of the era. She doesn't have a ball joint at her hips. She has a hinge, and then she has a thigh swivel. And this fortunately works very well in her favor. It makes her much more posable. Unfortunately, the downside of Storm is that she doesn't really have wrist articulation. It doesn't bend back and forth, it just has a swivel, and she doesn't have an ankle swivel either. But everything else works remarkably well on Storm, and this might be an action figure worth seeking out. And now, Soulmates, before we reveal the #1 best Toybiz Lady Marvel Legend, we have to take a look at our honorable mention, and our honorable mention for today is Lady Deathstrike from the Onslaught wave. Now, this is a bit of irony because I did not rate Lady Deathstrike very well on my ranking video of this wave, but she still remains as one of the better lady action figures from Toybiz at the time. The thing about Lady Deathstrike is you can tell they were trying to make a good action figure. Did they succeed? Well, not really, because the design was just flawed from the very beginning. You see a lot of stitching on her headpiece and little ridges on what's supposed to be kind of her wig, I guess you might call it. And then you also see lots of robotics on her arms, and it looks really cool. And her hands are even unique. They made nice large fingers for her. And then she's got this little plastic piece that goes on her torso, and it looks like padding, even though it's not. It's just hard plastic. But still, that looks pretty decent too. And then her legs have all those ridges, and there's lots of textural elements on here that work pretty well, and they'd work a lot better if the design of the action figure were better to begin with. So, although she obviously isn't very good, let's all take a moment and just appreciate the amount of work that obviously went into this one, because it was an entirely new sculpt that Toybiz whipped up for their Onslaught Bring on the Bad Guys wave. Finally, the #1 best Lady Marvel Legend from Toybiz is X-23. And mind you, there were 2 versions of X-23 for the Apocalypse wave. I have both of them, but I opened the purple variant. Both of them look absolutely wonderful though, and they share the same body. The only thing that's really different is the head sculpt. I was not expecting to enjoy this action figure as much as I did, but looking at it, they've got separation on her costume and her body, and I'm always looking for that on action figures, because like I say, it gives it a much more professional look. A fun feature on this one is that she has little hinges on her feet where you can pull out the claws, and it works really well and it looks really good. Much to my surprise on this one, even the hands look good. She just has a couple of fists, but they just feel so much better than that generic open hand that we see on so many Toy Biz action figures of the time. The articulation on this one is pretty fair, although she's not really lighting the world on fire with it. She doesn't have an ab crunch really, she's got a torso twist, and it doesn't really move forward or backward. So that's maybe not the best, but it still functions pretty well reasonably. Aside from that, some highlights are the wrists, which have a swivel at the end of her gauntlets, and also they have a joint that allows them to move back and forth. That's pretty nice. And then she also has an ankle swivel, sort of. It doesn't have a lot of range, but it is there, fortunately. It's one of those things you kind of just have to accept because Toy Biz never figured out the whole ankle swivel thing. Her shoulders are firmly planted in place. There's no lat articulation. There's no butterfly joint. And her hips are notable because they have the diagonal hip joint that Toy Biz loved to use around this time. It's one of those things that I didn't love about Toy Biz because it was kind of an awkward joint to handle. Despite all that, at least when you got the diagonal hip joint in a place that you liked, it didn't move all that easily after you were done playing with the action figure. I feel like this is the most accurate and best translation of a character from the comic book that I could find from one of Toy Biz's lady action figures. Well, soulmates, what do you think of this list? Do you have any of the lady action figures Toy Biz made? Or, now that you've seen this, do you want some of them? Also, soulmates, let me know what you think the top 5 lady action figures from Toy Biz are. Maybe you have a completely different list from me. I would love to hear about it, guys. If you want to check out my top 5 most overrated Marvel Legends list, you can watch that video here, soulmates.